Welcome to the Verint Guard Center training course. In this module, we will review how instant alerts are used in the Verint Edge VMS and Guard Center environments. This module will describe what can be done with instant alerts and the Edge VR, how to understand the workflow of the instant alert environment, the step-by-step process for configuring the instant alert server components, and finally, we will review some considerations for instant alerts in Guard Center environments. Instant alerts allow an Edge VR to immediately notify the Verint OpCenter server or instant alert server of high-priority events by establishing a network connection. The OpCenter server with the instant alerts feature receives an alert directly from the Edge VR and forwards by using Dispatcher. Dispatchers process the alerts and notify or forward the alerts to the appropriate destination. There are two types of dispatchers. Local dispatchers are usually part of the OpCenter server configuration, such as email or FTP. Remote dispatchers are typically software like VidCenter and are almost always located on another machine. The most basic components of the instant alerts are as follows. The Edge VR itself connected into a network. High-priority events, which might be connected physically, such as a dry contact for a panic button alarms. Or the event could be a special type of event coming in via a virtual trigger, like a door held open on an alarm panel or a night deposit. The alert could also be based upon a motion or analytics-triggered event. Licensing for Edge VR should already be present, but it's important to make sure. As well, if using a full OpCenter server, licensing and activation for that server will be necessary. Speaking of servers, the installation can be implemented with the full OpCenter server as mentioned above, or the user may choose to only install the instant alert server. In this case, it would be a Windows service running and a web interface used for configuration. Dispatchers are also required, which could be VidCenter clients or FTP or email servers. So the overall workflow looks like this. An event occurs at the Edge VR. The Edge VR forwards on to the instant alert or OpCenter server. The dispatcher forwards the alerts to the appropriate destination, such as FTP or email servers, as well as remote clients such as VidCenter. Different dispatchers can be made to accept different events and send alerts to different clients. Such as a panic button could go to an email server, which could be associated with an on-call security person. Or the door held open event could be forwarded to the Security Operations Center in the central headquarters. Of course, there's a few steps to set up. Let's start by looking at the Edge VR configurations. The first step in working with instant alerts is to ensure we have an Edge VR with one or more events configured. As well, we need to ensure the Edge VR is configured for instant alerts. We start in VidCenter, already connected to a unit. Select Set up DVRs and expand the directory tree in Task Actions. Double-click on Events and Surveillance to view the Events dialog box. Here, we've already configured the panic button type event, in which we see the following. The physical switch from a dry contact alarm is configured for the trigger. Duration is set correctly, and we have a pre-alarm set as well. We have our cameras to be associated with the event turned on. So the first half is done. We'll click OK to proceed. Next, let's look at programming the Edge VR events to be sent to an instant alert server. In Task Actions, double-click on Instant Alerts. Check the Enabled box at the top to turn on instant alerts. Enter the IP address or host name of the instant alert or OpCenter server. Don't forget to ensure the port is configured correctly. 7118 is the default port. It's important this is communicated to the networking team for the customer to ensure the Edge VR can communicate up to the server via this port. Finally, check the box next to each event we want to be sent to the server. In our case, we will select our panic button event. For the purposes of this module, let's take a quick look at the Health tab as well. Here we can see options including cameras, disks, UPS devices, network switches, and input-output extenders. By selecting these, we're telling the Edge VR to, in the case of issue with any of these items, send a health alert up to the Instant Alert server. This is available so the most important issues can be resolved faster if a team is monitoring the footprint of units. Click OK to save changes. We're now ready to proceed to the next step. Let's set up the Instant Alert server to receive and dispatch the alerts as they come in. Remember, this could be either a full OpCenter server or the Instant Alert server alone. For our purpose, we have a full OpCenter server. In a web browser address bar, we'll type the IP address or host name of the OpCenter server. This will be followed by a colon and the designated TCP port. The default port is 7111 for OpCenter. Log into the OpCenter server. Select Alerts option and then Instant Alerts to open the interface. On a brand new system, of course, the screen would look fairly new with no active Instant Alerts and no active dispatchers. Let's add a dispatcher for our VidCenter client. Click on Add New Dispatcher in the upper right corner. Type in a descriptive name for dispatcher. In the Delay in Minutes box, this allows the administrator to somewhat control when the alert will be processed. Typically, it's left blank. In the Dispatcher Type drop-down box, we have the options for FTP, in which we must have an FTP server, port username, and password. Email server, in which case we must enter the email address or list of addresses. And finally, the one we will select is Remote, which is used for VidCenter client workstations. Under Remote Dispatcher Type, we can choose from VidCenter, All Client Types, or Custom Client Types. We will choose VidCenter as we know it is a VidCenter client to which we will send the alerts. For now, leave Client Identifier field blank. Click on Add New Dispatcher to save the changes. Now in the Instant Alerts dashboard, we see an active dispatcher with the name and type we assigned. If we trigger our associated event on the Edge VR, we will see under Recent Alert section, the new alert appears. This is an indicator that Edge VR is sending alerts correctly and the dispatcher is receiving them correctly. Now let's configure a specific VidCenter client to receive the alerts. The last step is to set up our client to receive the alerts. In this case, we're setting up a VidCenter client. First, let's open VidCenter, and at this point, we are not connected to any NVRs. Go to the File menu and select Settings, then select the Instant Alert Server tab. Host name for the OpCenter server should be entered. The API port, defaulted at 7119, is the port on which the client applications send requests to the server. The Web UI port is the port on which the server listens for requests to view the OpCenter web interface. You'll also notice a Visit Website button, which if pressed, would take us to that web interface. Receive Alerts from Server Port On is a port on which the client VidCenter uses to receive dispatched alerts. It's important again to note that the networking team for the customer must be made aware of these ports to ensure proper communication between devices. Continuing on, you can program VidCenter with very specific identifiers, which Instant Alert Server will use to augment the interface, such as generating pop-ups. This is important, as without understanding this section, the interface may not perform as expected. For now, we'll program this with a custom ID of VC25. We must remember this for the next step. Finally, VidCenter can be programmed to play a sound when the alert is received. All is set, so we click OK to save changes. A quick reminder, we are still not connected to any NVRs. However, VidCenter and the Instant Alert server will begin communicating via their TCP ports. We can select the Instant Alert window in the Activity pane, and we will see the list of events coming into the VidCenter interface from the Instant Alert dispatcher. From here, we can right-click to acknowledge the alert, as well as enter comments for tracking purposes. And finally, we can clear the events as necessary. Notice here though, if we select from the list to View Live Video or View Recorded Video, VidCenter attempts to connect to the Edge VR. Once we're connected to the site from which we are receiving alerts, we can then begin viewing video. If we would like to configure the Instant Alert server to send pop-up alarms only to one designated VidCenter client, we configure this back in the Instant Alert server interface. Bringing the interface back up, under Active Dispatchers, we click on View. Recall the client identifier VC25 we entered into our VidCenter configuration. On the right-hand side of the screen, we press Click to Edit and are presented with a dialog box. Enter the correct identifier, in our case VC25, and press Enter on the keyboard. Now the panic button events coming from this Edge VR will be forwarded only to the VidCenter client VC25. One final note here. There may also be a need to have specific types of events sent only to a specific workstation. If events are labeled consistently from site to site, rules can be put into each dispatcher that tell it to only process events that fit a particular scenario. For instance, we'll open our existing dispatcher by clicking on View. Under Dispatcher Rules, select Add Rule. We can choose either Event or Health Event. And then we need to type in a filter for the dispatcher to use. So if all the events we need to process contain the word panic, we can type that in. Notice the instructions below give further clarity. Separate by commas, and the text we enter here will be compared against all received instant alerts. If any part of the event label matches, the dispatcher will process and forward as an instant alert. Once done, click Add to add that rule. Then click Done to save the dispatcher. There are a few considerations when using instant alerts in the GuardCenter environment. First, as we may have already seen, there are pop-ups in VidCenter via the pop-up window, and there are pop-ups for GuardCenter in the pop-up pane on a GuardCenter video wall. If a workstation is set up such that the GuardCenter pane is being used, the VidCenter pop-up window cannot be active on that same workstation. This is important because users of a system may intend to use the Security Operations Center to monitor health of the Edge VMS system as well. In a health alert, there is typically no video associated with the event, so GuardCenter, being a live video interface, would not know what to do with the non-video instant alerts. The VidCenter pop-up window would need to be used instead. To accomplish this scenario, a second workstation would be needed, which is only displaying the VidCenter alerts window. In this module, we have reviewed instant alerts in the Edge VR environment, the workflow of the instant alerts environment, a step-by-step process for configuring the instant alerts components, and finally, we've reviewed some aspects of instant alerts in GuardCenter environments. This module is concluded. Thank you for joining us. Please follow Verint on your favorite social media platform.